Okay, people, I gotta be honest, that episode was honestly kind of meh for me, like with last week, which is odd because I was totally expecting part 2 of this merge, to really be interesting. And, we just got a repeat of last week, just with a different ending. Although, this episode and the teaser that we get for next week is, at least, getting rid of a little bit of a worry that I got, because, last season's merge was a perfect example of something that I'm going to call power player suckage syndrome. Well, you get a group of power players who all band together and then wipe out everyone who's opposed to them, minus possibly the ultimate take to the end person. But then, once it's down to just the power players and possibly the ultimate take to the end person, all or almost all of the power players get picked off just as easily as they picked off the minority, because let's be realistic here. You could really don't argue that Tyler and Dan just allowed themselves to be picked off, and then Sierra really shot herself in the foot. So, huh? Rodney was the only person who was left in an unusual way in that power player group. So, yeah, that's one thing that makes the merge a little bit depressing, even though it's the side that I wanted to have triumph, Here, it doesn't look like that's going to happen, but who knows? It still might, because a lot of these people do have potential to do stuff. Whatever. Just wanted to throw that little tidbit out there. So, the cat dynamics, well, it was really just omnipresent themes throughout the episode. I mean, like, you got Sierra trying to make her argument that people need to do better, and I do appreciate what she's saying, but it only really works because this is an all-star season, and that's why people are listening to her. If this was a regular season, I gotta be honest, I think a lot more people would just push her away, even though they are pushing her away here anyway. Yeah. And then there's the Bayon Alliance, even though it's not really Bayon, because Sierra and Kaz traded places with Kelly Wigglesworth and Spencer, where, they're all starting to question, like exactly how true is everybody, who's going to be making the move first here, and that's the case when you've got more than 5 people in an alliance, they're always questioning what's going to happen, once it actually dwindles down. I mean, like the first blood was water, for crying out loud. There was like a 7-person alliance at the merge, and then it fractioned into completely different alliances later on in the merge. So, yeah. That's natural for them to understand that, especially with all the big strategy people there. And then Sierra's comment that she made a tribal about Joe, Jeremy, Tasha, and Savage all running the show. Well, I gotta be honest here, even though that is a darn good argument, everybody is still nonetheless contributing a little bit to the alliance, because like Spencer, he was partially responsible for keeping them alive, although not as much reason as the edit made us believe. And then, Kelly Wigglesworth and Keith are extra votes, and Steven is, playing along where he can, so everybody matters a little bit, so does the opposition. So you can make that valid argument, but at the same time, I feel like it's just as easy to say that it's not. Especially in Jeremy's case. I'll get back on him later, I hope. Alright. So, in terms of camp dynamics, really there's only 2 other things to talk about. Joe versus Steven, which I'll do a little bit later, and then what the Free Girls, or Amigas, were planning to do with their votes, and about them calling them, the Free Amigas. Really? Okay. I mean, like, okay, it's not just because I wasn't a fan of the Free Amigos, okay? It's just that I feel like when you do something like Amigos or Amigas, that's just been just so overused, and it just sounds stupid in my mind. It's just like the term the Three Musketeers when there's actually 4. I know that D, however you say his name, isn't a musketeer until the end of the book. I know that, but if you look up all the, posters or cover ups for this book, more often than not, there's 4 people, not 3. Okay? There's 4. Quit it. Right. So just Come on, make it unique, okay? Like Big Brother, okay? Even though I think at the same time it is a little bit ridiculous that every alliance needs to have a name. Right. So that reward challenge, I gotta be honest, I can't really talk about it that much because I didn't really care which side won, and even then, when it came to the people at camp or the reward talking, there just wasn't much to it. All that did was bring up the Joe vs. Steven dynamic, although I was glad that Steven was getting off his butt and trying to do that after he's been hitting that for a couple of episodes. So that was good to see him do it, and coincidentally, the people that were at camp, I think, were the people that were more willing to listen to him, but it was the people on the reward that he more like needs, because, well, Steven, I think, was fairly certain that Jeremy, Spencer, and Kimmy would listen to him, but he actually did need to talk to Sierra, Abby, and Kelly Wentworth about the idea, yeah, to fully guarantee it. But it did appear like that everybody was probably going to turn on him, minus the people that he's very close to, because Dalton Ross in his recap makes a very interesting point that even though there's technically 9 people in this alliance, really, if you want to pry into it, it does appear that there is 2 sub-alliances, one a little more obvious than the other, because the one that's obvious is Joe, Savage, Tasha, and arguably Kelly Wigglesworth on one side, and then the one that's a little less obvious, but one that I do see potential for, is Jeremy, Steven, Kimmy, and arguably Spencer. Now, why am I throwing Spencer with Jeremy and not Joe when Spencer was talking to him a lot last week? Well, here's why. Hypothetical. Say he goes with Savage, Joe, Tasha, and Kelly Wigglesworth. He can outshine Kelly Wigglesworth, and he might be able to outshine Savage. He cannot outshine Joe and Tasha. Now, if he goes with the Bayon 3, he can outshine Kimmy and Steven, and I actually do believe he's actually on an even playing field with Jeremy, despite Jeremy having the idol and not getting his name written down. So yeah, I think if it comes down to that, he's going to go with them, because I did, save his butt. And Keith, yeah, he's just there, even though he's that much more likely to go with Joe, but whatever. Yeah. So, as I think you might be getting at here when it comes to this Joe vs. Steven thing, I'm probably throwing my bets with Steven, even though he is acting like a goofball and not doing it very smooth, because he was overheard, just like with Rodney last season. Just come on, don't these people look? I mean, like, I'm sure they look, but it is true that there is the cameraman that can kind of tip you off, even though I think the contestants would get used to them after a while. And let me just state, it's not so much because, unlike last time, I don't have faith in Joe. I do have a little bit more faith in him this time, because he is behaving differently, but I think, like Steven over him, despite ironically seeing Joe's season and not Steven's season, but also, as I'm kind of alluding to here, if Steven gets in trouble, so will Jeremy and Spencer, and, like, Jeremy, because like he's been arguing that he wants to keep Joe around because that keeps the bullseye off him, but he then hears that Joe is targeting who I think I'm justified in saying is his right-hand man, and then he realizes, ironically, getting rid of Steven I think is going to hurt me more than Joe going, even though that does have the potential to put the bullseye on me, even though, in his season, I don't think he won any challenges, because he was runner-up for the first one out on the second one, I believe it wasn't in the third one. Well, obviously he didn't win that, because that was when he was voted out, so, right. So that sums that up. Yeah, so that immunity challenge, well, amazingly, I began to actually want Keith to win, because I really was thinking that if he lost, Joe was probably going to go, but in the end, Joe was able to pull it out. One time, well, somebody really did need to win an immunity, and they did. So I'll give him pros for that, even though I am, again, bummed at the result, because now the target is definitely on him. So then it comes down to which one of the girls is going. They tried to go between Sierra because of her voice, and then Kelly Wentworth because of, well, she doesn't broadcast her personality as clearly, even though Sierra is choosing to do this. Unlike Abby, because that's just who she is, right? Uh-huh. And I had beginning to think that it was actually more likely for Sierra to go, but at the same time I thought there was just as good a possibility that Kelly Wentworth was going to play her idol. So it turns out at Tribal she does, after that pretty interesting discussion that I've kind of already alluded to, and then Spencer stating that I do the same thing if I was in your spot, but I'm glad I'm not. That doesn't apply to Kelly Wentworth in my mind, that applies to Sierra, because Kelly Wentworth didn't say too much this episode. She said a little bit, but I don't think there really was enough for Spencer to justify himself saying that, okay? So, right. But then, as it turns out, none of the Bayon people ended up splitting their votes, so Savage goes. And the weird thing is, even though Savage in his calls to Dalton Ross, and Ross says Janino goes, well, it's just so tough to split the votes. Well, if they had actually thought about it, there was a pretty easy way that they could have split the votes. Now, it took me a while to realize this, okay? But here's the thing. If you had looked at that Bayon Alliance at the start of this episode, there's 6 guys and 3 girls. Yo, that's all you needed to do. Oh, I know what you're thinking. But if one person switches the vote, well, yes, that is probably where they run into issues, but they could have prioritized, which is what I was saying that Takeo should have done in episode 2 in terms of getting rid of Spencer, but then they still would have been covered, because nobody flipped in this 9-3 vote, or 3-0 vote, however you want to call it, yeah. So, I mean, I do kind of get that it's a little... This situation where they didn't split the votes is more justified than other situations, but at the same time, Savage's remark, I feel like, doesn't hold up given the very simple solution that I just described to you guys, okay? And then why did they target Savage and not Steven? Well, for 2 reasons, even though they are kind of similar. Puts Joe in a tougher situation, and possibly makes Joe more willing to come to them if they get him in the right spot. So they can use him both as a shield for their alliance, or they can use him as an ally. Because I really would not be too surprised if he loses his immunity and he goes, but of course anything can be shaken up here, and we still need a double elimination to happen in an episode, because traditionally when there's 20 people, I believe there's 14 episodes plus the finale, so one more than 16 and 18 people, but we still need, an extra person to go. Terry going did help, but, yeah. So, I think that about sums it up. And as for the next week bit, well, that's another interesting twist that Jeff can throw out, but I don't think I can say anything more than that until we actually see if anyone takes it, although I'm sure somebody will. See you then.